excuse me. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever you want to Archer. Not how you doing, son? Luke 1956. Chuck Money, how you doing out there? I bet you're all sitting there with pints of Guinness, aren't you? And I ain't got a pint of Guinness. I've just got a pint of water. There you go. Because I'm like that. I don't think we'll get that many in tonight, but I am going to be going through this. I did say about 15 minutes. Hopefully, I've gone live on YouTube. I can't see anything on YouTube at the moment. Let me just go and tell everyone that I am now live again. I've been thinking about this and thinking about, I don't really want to start getting involved with any of this because it is highly sensitive to the censorship brigade out there. But I think, for those who don't know, so for safety, it's going to go on Twitter. I can't see a problem with Twitter on this because they're already promoting one of the things that I'm going to be reading out. For the people that don't understand what's going on, I am literally going to be showing people. So how many people are coming? I've seen, so we've got 15 people on YouTube. There may be more. Truth Crusader, Adam, hello again. City Flyer, go on Graham, mate. Good to see you. How you doing? And what I'm going to do is just go through a few things here. Good evening, DD and Patriots. Schooner Mum. Hi, can't you get on Rumble now? But hi. Yeah, no, I'm on Rumble. I'm on Rumble, Twitter, Locals, and YouTube. Just to make sure. Hi, Graham. Just wandering back over to Rumble. Yeah, again, I don't expect there to be massive numbers because this is a late one. It's sort of an extra one, but because of the events with Venezuela and some of the things I'm seeing from certain people, UNN Networks is one of them, doing literally what Tommy Robinson did. You know when Tommy Robinson said, if you don't support Israel, you're a jihadist? Well, UNN Networks and other people, lots of other people out there are saying, oh, you're just falling for all this again. No. Listen, I didn't fall for any of the COVID shit. I didn't, it is causing massive cancer out there. There's lots of things going on in the world and there is a bigger picture, I agree, right? But some of these people are definitely drawing you down a road I don't like. George Galloway being one of them. And if it was down to me, I would banish George Galloway from England. So if we take our country back, he would be exiled to Scotland or could fuck off anywhere he wants, but don't come back to England. And if there's anyone that disagrees with that, well, you're entitled to your disagreement. Let me just have a quick look and see if I'm on the right thing. So there's a few things I want to show you before I get to the main one. But the main one, if I show you it briefly now, just so you get what's going on, I've put all of the links are in the description. They're not going to like this very much, but all I'm doing is going through these things to show you, right? So on your screen at the moment, this is the main one I'm going to go through. Emerald Robinson, a lady that is, I'll tell you what, it's a deep dive into everything that's gone on. There he is, Malloch Brown. And it goes through a lot of history. There's a couple of videos in it as well. This is going to be a long video, but if you're really interested and want to know want a different perspective of what's going on, right? Which is what all we're doing, right? I'm not interested in bullshitting people. I just want to know what it is that they're actually doing. So let me see how long that one was for. Show other replies. That was on 38. It goes all the way down, keeps going. Again, Lou Dobbs, 49, 51, 52, 53, That was a fantastic video. So really and truthfully, you need to go and read this for yourself as well. But I'm going to be reading them out. USA aid. US government invests $500,000 to pilot a new voting technologies in 24 Bosnia and Herzegovina municipal elections. Emerald, and then it goes on. There's more to this. 62. It just they keep adding to this, and they're giving you everything in the thread. All you've got to do is go and look for it. So there's 91 in that so far. Let's see if there's more in that. Can you see how big this is? So 98 White House, and again, I think that's on 101. The smaller Mexican drug cartels take orders from it. So I've told you the basics of. I think I've told you the basics of what's going on Twitter, right? Maduro is basically the boss of bosses, right? Without any doubts whatsoever. Everything goes through. Everything's been going through him. There are a number of criminal elements in other nations that are allowing it to go on, and that includes China, Iran, Russia, various different elements. Probably, I don't whether or not it's got anything to do with Israel or not. I don't know, right? But where there's a pound note there somewhere. But again, I'm just showing you. Let me go back to my main screen a second. Can everyone see what's on the actual screen there? Have you got that on the screen? Right. There's lots of things that are going to come up on this where, let me put it, I was reading it and going, fucking wow. Right. And all I'm doing is trying to make sure that you know what is actually going on, or to much as possible. So I'm going to go and share this tab instead, right? So what you've seen here is a guy called Will Robert, and this is President of the United States just signed an order revoking Chris Krebs' security clearance and directed AG Pam Bondi to investigate him for his role in the overthrow of the US government on November the 3rd, 2020. This is real, people, right? Krebs was the head of CISA, CISA, and that's in the other thread, right? Who weaponized his position and conspired with the FBI and big tech to censor truth, evidence, proof, and testimony about the 2020 elections. And bearing in mind, Nigel Farage kept telling Trump to drop this, right? And I've got a funny feeling that Farage knows what's going on, right? And everyone should understand with our case, Farage did not want our corruption case, our election petition brought before the courts, right? There is something going on. Right, Krebs was the head of the CSO who weaponized it, evidence proof testimony 2020 election to designate November the 3rd, 2020 as the most secure election in American history. Right? Do you all remember that term when they said it? It was him who said it, the geezer who's just had his security clearance revoked. Freedom of Information Act. The documents obtained by investigative journalist Yehuda Miller through Freedom of Information. This is really important, but it's also important you get the right information. We've done lots of these. Some of our supporters have done these and their own investigative directions, and they come back and say, we're not giving you this information, we're not giving that information. Lewis Black, I can't remember what his last name is, but who works with Rupert Lowe, is very good at all this. A secret meeting organised on Election Day, November 3rd, 2020, by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, involving Dominion officials, the FBI, Antifa, to discuss the overthrow of the United States government with private leftist companies and democratic groups. This included Jennifer Morrell with election group Ryan Massis, the Lafayette group, Antifa member Eric Kuma with Dominion, and Jocelyn Benson, Michigan Secretary of State, whom I'm certain brought her NGO, right, which have just been, every one of them's just been defunded, right, by executive order as well. Not a single conservative was invited, not one, right? Here Listen to this.
Christopher Krebs, the former head of CISA. Christopher Krebs, the former head of CISA. This is a man who weaponized his position against free speech in the election context, in the context of COVID-19. A presidential memorandum to the one you just signed, assurances he might have, and further instructs your Department of Justice, other aspects of your government, to investigate some of the malign acts that he participated in while he was still head of CISA.
This is another one. I don't know that I met him. I'm sure I met him, but I didn't know him. And he came out right after the election, which was a rigged election, badly rigged election. We did phenomenally in that election. Look what happened to our country because of it. Open borders, millions of people coming into our country. Russia and Ukraine, that would have never happened. October 7th would have never happened. Afghanistan, the way that they withdrew with 13 dead, but so many killed, actually. I mean, so many killed outside of the 13 soldiers, hundreds of people killed. And maybe, I don't know, never mentioned, but I mentioned it, 42 or 43 people so badly injured, the legs, the arms, blown off, the face. And this is all because of an incompetent group of people that preceded us, and that would have never happened. And this guy Krebs was saying, oh, the election was great, it was great. Well, it's been proven that it was not only not great. When you look at all these lawyers and law firms that are signing, giving us hundreds of millions of dollars, it was proven by so many different ways and so many different forms, from the legislatures not approving to the that worked from all of the different scamming operations. It was a very corrupt election. They used COVID to cheat. And we're going to find out about this guy too, because this guy's a wise guy. He said, we've been proved this is the most secure election.
You do know what a wise guy is. A wise guy in America is a gangster. And it's what I said in open court in Chester, that these are political criminals. This is organised political crime, right? About
the history of our country. Now, this was a disaster. And frankly, we should go to paper ballots, same-day voting, voter ID, and one other thing, you should get a little certificate that says you're a citizen of our country. You get a citizen piece of paper, it says you're a citizen before you can vote. But you want voter ID and you want paper ballots, and you really want same-day voting. If you don't have same-day voting, they decide to change the air conditioner. Oh, we're fixing the air conditioner. Let's move all these boxes. We'll bring them back in a few days. And then they don't bring back those boxes. We got to have safe elections. We have to have borders. Ideally, we have to have a free press, which we don't have. We don't have a free press. We have a very dishonest press. This is an honor. We're going to find out whether or not he was right. This was a disgraceful election. And this guy sat back saying, well, I'm a member, or like he's a Republican or something. And almost right from the beginning. And he's tried to make the case that this election was a safe election. I think he said, this is the safest election we've ever had. And yet, every day you read in the papers about more and more fraud that's discovered. He's the fraud. He's a disgrace. So we'll find out whether or not it was a safe election. And if it wasn't, he's got a big price to pay. And he's a bad guy. Here's another one. I have no idea who he is. Krebs. No idea who he is. I'm sure he was in the room at some point, just like you're all in the room, but I have no idea who he was. So thank you very much. Those last two are very important, I think, for the country.
Right, so I'm going to go back to my main screen, so I'm talking to you and I can see you now, right? All I'm going to do is going to run through some of these things because people are not being shown the picture as it's coming out, right? And it is crucially important that you'll understand that Venezuela was the central hub of organised large-scale criminality, that Maduro was, in effect, a bad guy. He was also being protected. His personal protection was by Cuba. and Cubans. And again, it's already been said, Cuba's in a lot of trouble. I think that whole area, including Greenland, is going to be taken over by America. They're going to say it's national security. They're going to give the countries autonomy, but there's certain things that they won't be. If it affects the security of the United States of America, they're just going to say fuck off, right? We're not tolerating it, and that could even include bringing what I don't describe as a United Kingdom, but England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland. Technically, I think they're seeing what's going on with the communist push into Europe, and it is a communist push into Europe. And what they're trying to do is save us. I believe that's eventually going to happen. That's just an opinion. That's not fact. But again, what I'm going to do, I've just shown you that one. I'm now going to show you this one. This is a guy in Venezuela. There's a whole list of his stuff on there, but I'm just going to show you this one. This is a 5-minute clip.
Who has been in hiding for more than a year, escaped Venezuela by boat. She made it to Norway, but not in time for the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. Her daughter accepted the award instead. You might recognize Maria Corina, but do you know about last year's presidential election? Because what happened that day is at the very center of everything that's happening right now between the US and Venezuela. In 2023, Maria Corina swept the opposition primary with a staggering 92% of the vote. The Maduro regime refused to let her register as a candidate, and then they refused her 80-year-old proxy candidate, Corina Lloris, from registering as well.
I want you to listen to this carefully, because some of the things they're saying in this are actually used by the British here. Right, stop you running as a candidate, stop you doing certain things. If they bankrupt you, you can never be a candidate again, which is what they're intending to do with me. And by the way, it is reform that is pushing forward with that. They don't want people like me in that parliament.
So her proxy became 75-year-old Edmundo González Urrutia, a former diplomat who had originally been nothing more than a placeholder. She convinced him to run in her place. And what followed was not a political campaign. It was a national phenomenon. As the presidential election approached on July 28, 2024, it became clear that the momentum behind Maria Corina Machado was unstoppable. And there was something else. For the international community, this election was seen as Venezuela's last peaceful path back to democracy. The stakes had never been higher. The Maduro regime understood this, which is why, in the weeks before the vote, they issued arrest warrants for her campaign managers. Several were forced to seek refuge inside the Argentinian embassy in Caracas, which the regime immediately surrounded and besieged. For Maduro and his inner circle, losing the election wasn't an option. It meant losing power, losing money, and possibly losing their freedom. On election day, Venezuelans flooded the voting centers. Across the country, people lined up from early morning, determined to vote. But what the Maduro...
Right, so I want people, I'm going to stop it there. Anyone's welcome to go and listen and listen to it again. Instead of telling people not to vote, can you imagine all these people out there? Do you know the ones who have been saying don't vote? It's a waste of time voting. Blah 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 blah. They're the communists because they don't want you to vote, so they can take control with a smaller majority, but a smaller amount of people voting. The way to do it is to overwhelm the system, right? If you overwhelm the system with your votes and get out and actually vote, they can't. It's much more difficult to have a corrupt election.
The regime didn't expect was that Maria Corina had prepared a strategy not just to win, but to prove she had won. She instructed Venezuelans to not simply vote, but to stay after voting, to protect their vote, to remain at the voting center until
they was watching it all the way, and they was asking for the tallies from the polling, right? And they collected that information all over the country.
The end of the night, when results were publicly read aloud. Under Venezuelan law, the vote count at each voting center is public. The community has the legal right to hear the tally, and each party's witness is entitled to a legal official copy of the results before they are transmitted back to the headquarters in Caracas. Maria Corina built a massive grassroots network of volunteers, electoral witnesses stationed in nearly every voting center in the country. In some centers, the military tried to expel them, but this time it wasn't so easy because there were hundreds of citizens that were standing outside, demanding that the witnesses receive their copy of the tallies. The pressure was enormous, and something remarkable happened. Early that evening, before even 20% of the votes had been counted, the regime realized they had lost. They ordered the military stationed at the voting centers to stop counting and to kick out the witnesses. but many soldiers disobeyed, whether out of fear of the crowd.
That happened at Batley and Spen when I was there, when the candidate for the English Democrats, who we all helped campaign for, and there was about 50 of us out there delivering leaflets, and it was a proper campaign, where they stole the election from George Galloway.
Outside, or out of loyalty to the truth, they completed the tallies and released the results anyways. Suddenly, videos began appearing online, flooding Venezuelan social media, hundreds of them, showing tally sheets being read aloud across the country, center after center, town after town, state after state. Maduro had not won a single voting center, not one. Edmundo Gonzalez had won everywhere, across demographic lines, across geographic lines, across social classes. It was a landslide without precedent. The celebrations in those videos were explosive. People were shouting, crying, hugging strangers. It was undeniable the opposition had won, and everyone knew it. And yet the regime refused to accept the results. Hours later, the Electoral Authority announced that Nicolás Maduro had won with 55% of the vote. They offered no data. They claimed that there had been a cybernetic attack that prevented them from releasing the breakdown of the numbers. More than a year later, they haven't released a single tally to prove their victory. Maria Corina, on the other hand, did something extraordinary. Remember that grassroots network of hundreds of thousands of electoral witnesses? Each one had an official government-stamped tally sheet for their center. And they protected them by stuffing them in their shoes, hiding them in their clothes, even taping them to their bodies. They traveled through the night to special collection centers set up across the country in secret, including in areas without electricity or internet. Within 48 hours, her team had scanned and uploaded over 80% of all tally sheets nationwide, creating the most comprehensive parallel vote count in Venezuelan history. It was undeniable proof the opposition had won, and the Maduro regime had been caught in the ultimate lie, stealing the sovereignty of the Venezuelan people. And it's important to understand this. This wasn't just Maria Corina. Venezuelans did this. Hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens who risked everything, their safety, their livelihoods, in some cases their lives.
And this not putting too fine a point, people who became witnesses for us, the people who give evidence for us in that court, me doing what I've done, them attacking me and now trying to bankrupt me, and Reform UK being and the council being the principles behind that when they were both funded, is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing. And this is the same situation. It is why politics is so corrupt, and Nigel Farage is part of that.
For the truth. After the election, the regime never recovered. It lost all legitimacy, and the country rose up. The day after the vote, spontaneous protests erupted across Venezuela. Under pouring rain, people came down from the hills of Caracas, reaching just blocks away from the presidential palace. People took to the streets, burned images of Maduro, tore down propaganda billboards, toppled statues of Chavez. This was the Maduro regime's greatest moment of weakness, and it responded with the only thing it had left: state terrorism. Opposition volunteers and voting witnesses were hunted, arrested, disappeared, or forced to flee. Maria Corina's candidate, who had beaten Maduro in the election, was forced into exile, and the regime even kidnapped his son-in-law, taken while dropping off his daughters at school. He was just sentenced to 30 years in prison. Today, openly criticizing the Maduro government is enough to be charged with terrorism. People are terrified, but they have not forgotten what happened on July 28th. Because they saw it with their own eyes. They heard the results with their own ears. They held the tally sheets with their own hands. Maduro lost. And that truth is the regime's greatest fear. Venezuelans refuse to turn the page. And right now, Maria Corina Machado remains the indisputable leader of the democratic resistance. And that's where things stand today. And her story isn't just about Venezuela. It's about what it takes to confront a brutal dictatorship without giving up on democracy. And that is why Maria Corina Machado was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. If you have any questions, as always, leave them in the comments.
There's more.
Yesterday,
there's a lot more to him, but what I want to do is get to this one. So I've crossed over. Hopefully, I'm sharing this tab now instead. Sidney Powell, attorney. Sidney Powell is fantastic legal brain, proper integrity, like I've never seen with any lawyer, right? It's going to be a very interesting year. Buckle up, defending the Republic, right? Venezuela former director of military intelligence Hugo Caravaggio alleges dozens of U.S. senators tied to Maduro regime. Right, in other words, they are working for the regime. And there's lots of people saying that this lady should be, and that's her there, should be the Attorney General. Her integrity is fantastic. But to get on to the main point of this, so I'm going to cross back over. Hopefully there's plenty of people watching this, and I'm going to go through this so everyone can see what we're actually talking about. Now, this is a long thread, right? I think it's important that I voice an opinion across these sections. Anyone who's out there slagging off President Trump, I think there's more to all of this than meets the eye in a really big way. Like I said, I don't think this is a game. They're going for Greenland. This is an attack on America, and it's an attack on England. England, not the UK. England is under attack. The common law is under attack. The Constitution is under attack in the United States of America and in England, right? The British do not have a constitution. So is everyone seeing and hearing me and seeing what I'm putting up and going through that, and everyone understands what's going on? She ducked out, released the Kraken. Well, I think you're about to see quite a bit being released now. You've got to have the right people in place before you release the information, like out England, Trump, Juicy and Lucy. Right, let me have a quick look. Can you all see that here at 5v5? Cockney Girls, Starmer and Khan and others will be shitting themselves. No, they will be, and especially Khan. Considering that they took you look at the state of London now. I think everything in this was all to do with this. So again, Emerald Robinson, right? Just to give you an indication, she's not a Mickey Mouse account. She's got 911,000 followers, and I find that when and she has been a host on a number of different things. It is time to explain exactly what happened on Election Day 2024 to stop the steal. This will be a very long thread. It's 98 posts. It involves quite a few people over 4 years, dozens of sources. We must begin just after the rigged 2020 election. Let's begin the story in December. And this is one of the reasons, again, why Maduro has been brought in, right? And it's the access to the treason part, right? Why? Because President Trump wanted election fraud investigated. He told his team to hire someone to discover the truth about the voting machines. Multiple sources tell me an ex-CIA investigator was hired for the job. The investigator reported that claims of election fraud were overblown. Some Department of Justice lawyers also wanted election fraud investigated. Those efforts were blocked by AG Bill Barr, who is also linked to Epstein, staff, including Barr's chief of staff, Will Levy, threatened to quit if any cases were launched. Just think about that, right? Let me just making sure I can go through this. Right. Also, in December 2020, a group of national security analysts briefed the White House that enough evidence of election fraud existed to launch a full USG investigation. In January 2021, several GOP senators were briefed as well. Neither the White House nor the senators authorized the investigation. A few people tried to alert President Trump about the National Security Analyst briefing and the need for a full investigation in late 2020, but those efforts were blocked by the White House counsel Paul Cipollone. According to two sources, Cipollone joined Bill Barr's firm on January the 17th, 2024. Chris Krebs, who the first video I showed you, where President Trump has just stopped his security clearance, Chris Krebs, the head of a small agency called CISA, which is inside the Department of Homeland Security, sent out, and don't forget, someone very, very similar in the Department of Health, Homeland Security was shot dead in a vehicle, sent out a press release in late 2020 claiming that the 2020 election was the most secure in American history. Krebs was not a cybersecurity expert. Who hired him? The head of Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. Krebs was hired because he was Chad Wolf's close friend. He worked at CISA coordinating with left-wing orgs like Democracy Works to prepare for the 2020 elections. Trump fired Krebs a week after he dismissed Defense Secretary Mark Epster. Trump removed Epster, Chris Miller and Era Corrin. Chris Miller was a good guy, I think. Were rushed into the Pentagon on November the 11th because Esper stopped responding to the White House. White House officials feared a soft coup was taking place. On the November the 18th, Miller put all special forces under his direct command, right? And if I remember rightly, Chris Miller was the guy, one of the first guys that ever went into Afghanistan. There's another geezer I'm going to show you in a minute, right? When I was deposed by Dominion lawyers in 2024, I was asked specifically about the tweet from November the 10th, 2020, because it was, I was told, the first mention on social media with a link between Smartmatic and Dominion. That's an important point. All crooked roads lead to Dominion voting system. And there it is. There's the tweet, right? On November the 11th, 2020, a note on Twitter that Mark Malloch Brown, this is the British part of it coming in, the best friend of global villain George Soros, was listed on the board of directors for Smartmatic. Dominion voting system leads you to Smartmatic, which leads you to Mark Malloch Brown. Who is he? He is the best friend of George Soros. By November the 12th, 2020, any mention of Mark Malloch Brown and his leading role with Smartmatic had been wiped from the company's website, and it had been, I believe it was one of the reasons why they took me down on a number of platforms, because I was talking about this guy quite regularly and about who and what he was. All of that information has been screen saved, and I don't think you can even get it if you go back through Time Machine. On November the 19th, 2020, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell held a press conference in the RNC headquarters. Powell claimed that Dominion brand machines were being Smartmatic software. She also claimed Smartmatic software was developed in Venezuela for dictator Hugo Chavez. By mid-November, public network scans of Dominion made by military intelligence analysts were available through the legal filings in Michigan. What these documents revealed about America's election system was damning, and there's a whole thread on that, which I'm not going to go through, but there it tells you all about the military analysis of it, right? This is where the phrase "we have it all" comes from. On anyone who knows anything about IT, you can make an absolute image of a hard drive, and everything that is on that image cannot be removed. It's there, right? They call it a forensic image. December the 18th was also the due date for DNI Ratcliffe to submit a report to President Trump on foreign interference in 2020 elections. Ratcliffe missed the deadline. 3 days till the report is due by DNI Ratcliffe to POTUS on foreign interference in the 2021 elections. Ratcliffe did not release his report until January the 7th, 2021. Note the date of release. His report stated that CIA management actively suppressed intel that China interfered with the 2020 election. That's right. The CIA was hiding China's role in the 2020 election. Treason. Everyone just hear what I just said, right? This is about building a case, and it's not just about Maduro. This is about people actually facing a firing squad for treason, right? Ratcliffe confirmed that China interfered. Let me just go back before I do anything else. Can you all see and hear me? And you're all interested in what's going on here. What I'm doing is reading out and telling you there's a lot more to this than what people are actually realising. And I'm not, like I said in my original tweets, and there's tweets out there, Maduro has been arrested by a grand jury indictment, right? A grand jury indictment is the most powerful thing in the world, and it can be backed by military force, and it has been, right? The fact that they're bringing in for major RICO drug offences, drug terrorism, narco terrorism, whatever you want to describe it as, there's a lot more to this than what people are actually seeing. And some of these people in the background to be suggesting something different is either they're part of it, and I'm not talking about UNN networks, he's a pleb, but what I'm saying is there is something going on in the background. Why it is that these people keep trying to attack Trump, right? There's lots of people that are going to fall out of bed with this one in a very, very big way. Right, so I'm going to go back to my main screen. As long as you're all hearing and seeing me, we're only 17 into this at the moment. Ratcliffe confirmed that China interfered in the 2020 election and that the CIA had tried to hide that fact, but this info arrived too late to help President Trump. Here's a link to Ratcliffe's letter, and it's there. So all of the information is in here. You can go and click on the thing and click through it and read it all for yourself, right? On January the 6th, almost 100 House Republicans and more than 12 GOP senators were ready to object to election results in Congress. On an emergency, only an emergency could override and halt that day's session, right? When an emergency happens, special rules apply in Congress, right? Which is what happened when they allowed all the people in, right? Less than 10 minutes before two reps called a vote for motions to suspend the election certification, Capitol Police claimed that protests outside might breach the chambers. Key leaders were escorted out. Speaker Pelosi then halted Congress using emergency rules, right? All staged. If you think about what just happened to me do you remember when I said it was an abusive process where they went for this appeal? When I was like, this is a really weak case when I was looking at it. I won 3-0. But what did they really bring the case for? Within a week, they got an appeal through. And it's an election petition. What was the purpose? Because they needed to take out the two original judges who weren't with them, right? Then they could put their own judges in place, which is exactly what happened with the trial, right? So Tier 1 operators, FBI agents present that day in the crowd, exercising the First Amendment rights, saw a red starlight shell fired over the Capitol just before the fake insurrection began. The shell is used to signal the start of battle. After January the 6th, the FBI WFO emailed all employees that if they were on the mall, they were required to give a statement. Some agents who didn't volunteer were identified by others, and they were required to give statements against their will. Those FD 302s are still secret, right? The Department of Justice's OIG later found that FBI had at least 26 confidential human sources who were present at the Capitol on January the 6th. None of the confidential human sources were ever prosecuted, right? So, in other words, and just to make sure I'm clear on this, in crime in the UK and crime in America, there are very strict rules and legal rules on agent provocateurs, right? Very, very strict rules. And if you actually are part of a conspiracy or lead the conspiracy and lead the illegal acts, which is now they've changed the law in this country to say that the police can do that, you're actually setting people, in other words, it's not a crime. You've created the crime in the first place. So it's the state creating the crime and then prosecuting the crime. That's exactly what happened, right? It was all a load of bollocks, and some poor lady got shot in the head. On January the 8th, Dominion filed a defamation lawsuit against Sydney Power for $1.3 billion in damages. On January 25th, Dominion filed a similar lawsuit against Giuliani. Suits against Fox, ONN, Newsmax and others soon followed. This is where lawfare comes in. Dominion's lawyers are Sussman Godfrey LLP. This is where these people are corrupt to the core, right? And judges are also corrupt to the core. On February the 4th, Smartmatic filed a defamation lawsuit against Fox News for $2.7 billion in damages. On November the 3rd, Smartmatic filed similar lawsuits against Newsmax and ONN. I was named as a witness in both the Dominion Smartmatic cases against Newsmax. In discovery, Dominion and Smartmatic were allowed to search the personal phones and private emails of TV hosts, TV producers and journalists, not just emails but texts. This had never been allowed before in the history of American journalism. Courts ignored all press freedoms. Well, that's really bad. Trump was impeached for the second time on January the 13th, 2021, 1 week before his term expired. The House adopted one article against him, incitement of insurrection. The Senate trial began on February the 9th. Final vote, 10 votes short of the two-thirds majority required to convict. No GOP senator stated publicly at the time that January the 6th was fabricated by the national security state to halt lawful investigations of election fraud. Instead, they went along with a coup. Most of them voted to confirm all of the Biden's cabinet picks in 2021. Again, relate this to what's just happened to us in court. The judges basically refused point blank to believe our witness, to believe us, the eyewitness statement, and even to the fact that we said an individual ballot recount, etc. Let me just nut that off. Mute tab. I don't know what's going on there. Right, let me go into this one. Right, so the illegal, let me just check with the audience that I'm not doing this too boringly. You're following it because I'm doing a little bit of ad lib, but not a lot. I know how boring this can be, but I do want to get this recorded because I think this is vital evidence that people need to understand. Who's up there? So we're up. We've got about 400 people watching, and I can't see how many people are watching on Twitter at the moment. But I do think this is all vital information. Everyone knows it. Yes, your commentary is great. The Kew Gardens. Again, one of the reasons why I do this is because some people are dyslexic, can't read, etc. There's a couple of people out there that say to me, when you do these readouts, it helps me because I can just sit there and listen to it. And obviously, some people are blind as well, so what they're getting is this read out to them, and everyone understands exactly what's going on. But back to this 29, the illegal Biden regime started on January the 20th, 2021. As of its first acts, the Biden regime allowed China to access a US power grid. This made it clear Joe Biden was owned and operated by the CCP. This is why it gets so bad. I'm going to play this.
All right. And then we'll come to you, sir. Go ahead. Thanks, Jen. In an executive order that the president signed last week, he also suspended a Trump administration executive order that was particularly aimed at keeping foreign countries, specifically China, from interfering in the U.S. power grid. But he suspended that for 90 days in that executive order last week. Given what you said about China today, why did he do that, especially related to something so critical to our national security as the power grid?
I think the president's view on our relationship with China, I tried to do my best to convey to all of you. I'll have to check on that specific piece, and we'll circle back with you directly.
Meanwhile, Dominion hired Claire Locke, LLP, to send letters to 150 people demanding that they cease and desist from taking part in defaming Dominion and to preserve all documents. The voting machine companies were trying to make discussions of election fraud illegal or actionable. On February the 5th, Fox News pulled Lou Dobbs off air. He was highest rated host on Fox Business. I used to love watching him. The day before Dobbs and Fox were named in a $2.7 billion defamation lawsuit by Smartmatic. So anyone out there saying, oh, you know, President Trump shouldn't sue the BBC. Oh, yes, he fucking should, right? And for a lot more than a couple of billion. That same day, Time magazine reporter Molly Ball published a cover story touting the inside story of the conspiracy, which confirmed the 2020 election had been fortified by American elites to install Biden. The story had the opposite effect of what the author wished. By February 2021, Rasmussen found 61% of GOP voters agreed Biden did not win the election fairly. Voters were already turning against GOP officials who called the election secure. House Republicans held their first vote to oust Liz Cheney as a leader. She was gone by May. The illegal Biden regime knew its public support was already shaky in February 2021. So that month, the National Archives and Records Administration, NARA, contacted Trump to return some documents to them. This setup would lead to the FBI's Mar-a-Lago raid in 2022. This is all linked. On May 19th, the House voted to form a committee on the January the 6th attack with 35 Republicans voting for it. Pelosi later made it a select committee with only two GOP members, only Cheney and Kinsley. A former CIA inspector, General David Buckley, served as its staff director. By June, the Biden regime tried the ultimate power grab by putting all state elections under the control of the federal government through the Freedom to Vote bill. When the bill was blocked by GOP, Dems pressured Manchin and Sinema to end the Senate's filibuster rules. In September 2021, the January 6th committee worked. This is all about communism, by the way, taking control of we the people, right? Which is exactly what they've done in England. The January 6th committee worked to change the 1887 Electoral Court Count Act, right? Remember what I was working with in the court system was basically the Representation of the People's Act, 1983, but it went all the way back to the 1800s. This was done to answer Dr. Eastman's memo, which laid out a legal plan for how VP Pence could have certified the 2020 election in Trump's favour. Congress passed the Reform Act in 2022. On November the 12th, Stephen Bannon was indicted on 2 counts of contempt of Congress after he refused to comply with January the 6th committee subpoenas. The January the 6th committee recommended contempt charges against Mark Meadows on December the 13th. By December the 13th, January the 6th committee had already obtained and leaked the text messages of Trump White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows to left-wing media outlets. It's this illegally leaked. This illegally This illegally leaked text included messages from Fox News hosts Laura Ingraham and Sheen Hannity and Brian Kilmeade. By fall of 2021, the Biden regime was widely hated by the American people. The crowd at NASCAR race chanted Joe Biden on live TV in October. The same chant spread quickly to sports events at every venue in America. The Biden's regime's answer was to increase the tyranny. Lawfare through our court system was used to destroy critics. News outlets were forced into major settlements to stop coverage of the election fraud. People were silenced on social media by the CIA and FBI agents giving orders through proxies. That's a biggie, right? So just to make sure that item there, and remember, Farage was the one trying to persuade Trump not to take any of this election fraud stuff forward, right? Only a small group of people had paid close attention to the voting machine companies, Smartmatic and Dominion, before the 2020 election. Only a few people knew that certain companies were actually international criminal organizations. In fact, there was a news segment by Lou Dobbs in 2006 that you should watch.
A firm owned by Venezuela could be allowed to take over one of this country's top voting machine firms. Venezuela, of course, led by Hugo Chavez, working to change the views of most South American countries, move to the left. Critics of the deal say our nation's very democracy is now for sale without anyone doing a thing about it. Kitty Pilgrim reports.
The use of some 19,000 electronic voting machines in the city of Chicago and Cook County primary on March 21st of this year is now under intense scrutiny. The U.S. company that makes the machines, Sequoia, was bought in 2005 by Smartmatic, a private company primarily owned by Venezuelan businessmen. When Chicago had problems with the machines, a dozen Venezuelan employees were there to help with the election. Chicago officials are outraged.
I think that American elections ought to be run by American companies and ought to be run by American citizens, not Venezuelan nationals.
Smartmatic is technically based in Boca Raton, Florida, but the president of the company, Jack Blaine, testified to the Chicago City Council. Fewer than a dozen Smartmatic employees work in Florida. The majority of the workers are based in Venezuela. Watchdog groups question why U.S. voting machines would be under the control of citizens of another country, especially a country whose own election process is highly suspect.
We believe this is a national security issue. There is no way that companies belonging to non-U.S. corporations should have access to our elections.
The Treasury Department is supposed to monitor sales of U.S. companies to overseas investors where there is a question of national security, such as in the Dubai ports deal, the so-called CFIUS review process. Some in Congress are demanding an investigation.
In the case of Smartmatic, there are a number of unanswered questions. That's why I wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury and asked them to review the ownership. It's offshore, it's murky, no one seems to know who owns it. Certainly our government should know.
A potential risk to the democratic process. Now, we called the Treasury Department to ask if the sale of Sequoia in 2005 had been reviewed or not. Treasury told us they were aware of the sale, but can't confirm if it's been reviewed or not. And some in Congress and voter watchdog groups also are demanding a better answer than that, Lou.
Well, this Treasury Department is filled with incompetence. They have stopped in over 1,500 reviews, only one sale to foreign owners' American assets. But a voting machine company, critical to this country's election count, and they can't tell you whether or not the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States reviewed it or not.
They have no answer for us. And
these are the most arrogant, incompetent, bureaucratic idiots. I mean, the Treasury Department is trying to move ahead of a number of other departments in that category.
It's incomprehensible that this would be in any way.
Have we put a call into? I know John Snow's on a short tenure and short on tenure, but perhaps somebody who works for him would have some basic sense that he owes the American people an answer.
Lou, we have been trying to get the officials. They said they thought it was a company. So there are a lot of people in murky territory right here, and I think it really does deserve some examination.
Great. It certainly does. We're going to continue to do so. I think we need to tip our hat to the Congresswoman. She did a marvelous job in looking into this, and hats off to her. At least somebody is trying to make some sense. This administration, call the White House. Let's find out the answer so this audience knows exactly what's going on by Monday evening. And this is ridiculous.
We are looking into it.
And again, that was genuine anger. If anyone's watched Lou Dobbs, he's not. He's a broadcaster. I think I'm not sure if he's died now, but fantastic. And you can see his anger. He knew exactly what was going on. On August the 8th, 2024, a federal grand jury in Florida indicted top Smartmatic executives for this in August 2024. Right, a federal grand jury in Florida indicted top Smartmatic executives for bribery and money laundering related to the 2016 elections in the Philippines. Roger Eugenio Perez, Jorge Miguel Faquez, Eli Moreno, right? Election officials in the Philippines also wanted Smartmatic investigated for changing the script in a transparency server without informing the Commission on Elections, since the change put into question the results of the May 9th, 2016 election. Sound familiar? People should realise how serious this threat is. And by the way, this is all true. There's no bullshit here. I'm telling you the truth, right? And I've checked on all of this, and from my own knowledge of what happened before when I was covering it, this is all true stuff. It's just, for me, it's just a refresher. Which bogus NGO was chosen to observe those 2016 elections? That's why they've cut off all funding to NGOs. It was the Carter Center, headed by former President Jimmy Carter. It also observed in 2006 elections in Venezuela. Carter himself later claimed that Venezuela had the best electoral system in the world. In March, and he weren't the brightest of men, Carter, in March 2005, Smartmatic required Secola voting systems, which gave it significant control over US elections. Smartmatic's new machines were used in Chicago primaries in March 2006. Just think how bad Chicago is now in the way it's being run. Think of London and 10 times worse, right? The vote was halted in a key race there due to problems with the new machines. After the issues in Chicago, an investigation of Smartmatic began in October 2006 with a Committee on Foreign Investment in the US, CFUS, Republican Carolyn Maloney, New York, asked the Bush administration to review the Secola deal. Why Smartmatic's ownership was hidden in foreign trusts, right? So why Smartmatic's ownership was hidden in foreign trusts? Remember what I've just said there, right? They was basically trusts with bearer bonds. No one knew who actually owned it. Whoever was holding the bearer bond or the bearer trust was the person who owned it, right? Smartmatic did not divulge its owners to Congress. Instead, it sold Secola to a small company in Canada. Think about Canada, called Dominion in December 2006. That ended the probe by CFIUS. But Dominion and Smartmatic were always linked. In 2008, both companies worked together to automate the Philippine election system. In fact, Smartmatic once used Dominion in Delaware for breaching a license agreement between them. So they were in bed together from the very beginning. Just look at the Smartmatic's Venezuelan senior development, David Moreno, who moved over to work in Secola in 2006, then became Director of Election Production and Testing at Dominion. That's how Smartmatic, Secola and Dominion got into our elections in 307 counties and 16 states. In fact, Lemzi Solaris, a special ops and security for communist dictator. This is fantastic. You want me to read this out to you? Proper read this out to you, right? I've never read anything like this document. This affidavit is unbelievable. Had already provided an affidavit with the details of the Smartmatic Dominion's connection. I've got to read this to you. Because it is literally dynamite, right? As president, in that election, Nicolas Maduro ran against Caprice Radonsky. Inside that location was a control room in which there were multiple digital display screens, TV screens for results of voting in each state in Venezuela. The actual voting results were fed into that room and onto the displays over the internet feed, which was connected to a sophisticated computer system created by Smartmatic. People in that room were able to see in real time whether the vote that came through the electronic voting system was in their favour or against them. If one looked at any particular screen, they could determine that the vote from any specific area or as a national total was going against their candidate. Persons controlling the vote tabulation computer had the ability to change the reporting of votes by moving the votes from one candidate to another by using the Smartmatic software. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon on that election day, Caprice Rudensky was ahead of Nicolas Maduro by 2 million votes. When Maduro and his supporters realised the size of Rudensky's lead, they were worried that they were in a crisis mode and would lose the election. The Smartmatic machines used for voting in each state were connected to the internet and reported their information over an internet to the Caracas control center in real time. So the decision was made to reset the entire system. Maduro's and his supporters ordered the network controllers to take the internet itself offline in practically all parts of Venezuela and to change the results. It took the voting system operators approximately 2 hours to make the adjustments in the vote from Rudensky to Maduro. Then, when they turned the internet back on and the online reporting was up and running again, they checked each screen state by state to be certain that they could see that each vote was changed in favour of Nicolas Maduro. At that moment, the Smartmatic system changed votes that were for Caprice Rudensky to Maduro. By the time the system operators finished, they had achieved a convincing but narrow victory of 200,000 votes for Maduro. After Smartmatic created the voting system President Chavez wanted, he exported the software and system all over Latin America. It was sent to Bolivia, Nicaragua, Argentina, Ecuador, and Chile, countries that were in alliance with President Chavez, communists and criminals. This was a group of leaders who wanted to be able to guarantee they maintained power in their countries when Chavez died. Smartmatic was in a position of being the only, I hope you're all enjoying this. This is a fantastic affidavit. Company that could guarantee results in Venezuelan elections for the party in power. I want to point out that the software and fundamental design of the electronic electoral system and software of Dominion and other election tabulating companies relies upon software that is a descendant of the Smartmatic electoral management system. In short, the Smartmatic software in the DNA is in the DNA of every vote tabulating company software and system. Dominion is one of the three major companies that tabulates votes in the United States and Smartmatic, etc., in the UK. Dominion uses the same methods and fundamentally same software design for the storage, transfer and computation of voter identification data and voting data. Dominion and Smartmatic did business together. The software, hardware and system have the same fundamental flaws which allow multiple opportunities to corrupt the data and mask the process in a way that the average person cannot detect fraud or manipulation. And it can be done manually, which is what happened to us in Runcorn and Hillsby. The fact that the voting machine displays a voting result that the voter intends and then prints out a paper ballot which reflects the change does not matter. It is the software that counts the digitized vote and reports the results. The software itself is the one that changes the information electronically to the result that the operator of the software and vote counting system intends to produce that counts. Right, so this is a bit like where Joseph Stalin told everyone it's not the people that count that matter, it's the people that count the votes. And if you can organise and create a software system that does it, or you corrupt the counters, which is what happened to us in Runcorn and Hillsby, the software decides the result regardless of what the voters vote. All of the computer-controlled voting tabulation is one in a closed environment so that the voter and the observer cannot detect what is taking place unless there is a malfunction or other event which is causing the observer to question the process. I saw firsthand that the manipulation and changing the votes can be done in real time at the secret counting centre which existed in Caracas, Venezuela. For me, it was something very surprising and disturbing. I was in awe because I had never been present to actually see it occur, and I saw it happen. So I learned firsthand that it doesn't matter what the voter decides or what the paper ballot says. It is the software operator and the software that decides what counts, not the voter. In one of the questions, and reliability of my observations, that they only have to read the words off a time period, right? And again, I'm going to go into this. I think this is, might be a couple more pages, which Smartmatic had possession of all the votes and the voting. The votes themselves and the voting information at the disposition of Venezuela, and there's bits of redacted. He was assuming that the voting system implemented or used by Smartmatic was completely secure, that it could not be compromised, was not able to be altered. But later in 2017, when there were elections where Maduro was running and elections for legislators in Venezuela, and Smartmatic broke their secrecy pact with the government of Venezuela, he made a public announcement through the media that in which he stated that all the Smartmatic voting machines used during these elections were totally manipulated, and they were manipulated by the actual council of Venezuela back then. Stated that all of the votes for Nicolas Maduro and the other persons running for the legislature were manipulated, and they actually had lost. So I think that's the greatest proof that the fraud can be carried out and will be denied by the software company that admitted publicly that Smartmatic had created, used, and still uses vote counting software that can be manipulated or altered. I am alarmed because of what's occurring in plain sight during the 2020 election for President of the United States. The circumstances and events are eerily reminiscent of what happened with Smartmatic software electronically changing votes in 2013. Presidential election in Venezuela. What happened in the United States was that the vote counting was abruptly stopped in 5 states using Dominion software. At that time, the vote counting was stopped. Donald Trump was significantly ahead in the votes. Then during the wee hours of the morning, when there was no voting occurring and the vote count reporting was offline, something significantly changed. When the vote reporting occurred, the very next morning, there was a very pronounced change in vote in favour of the opposition candidate, Joe Biden. I have worked in gathering information, researching and working with information technology. That's what I know how to do, and the special knowledge that I have. Due to these recent election events, I contacted a number of reliable and intelligent co-workers of mine that are still informants and work with the intelligence community. I asked for them to give me information that was up-to-date information in far as how to all of the businesses are acting and what actions they are taking. Let me just go back to the next one. And then he says, I declare under penalty of perjury that the following foregoing is true and correct, and that the declaration was prepared in Dallas County, state of Texas, Texas again stepping up, and executed on November the 15th, 2020. Right? So there it is. Now I'm going to hit that button and go back. Let me just ask the audience, because I don't want to be boring. Can you see how powerful that was? So that is an affidavit from someone who actually witnessed what was going on, and that was the equivalent of what we was doing in that court of law in Chester. And the two new judges that were swapped in my opinion, by an abusive process. Right, that's what actually, and then they're stabbing me in the back now, is what they're actually doing. But you've all got that. Give me a 5x5 if you're okay, and I'll keep running through it, because it is an important. This isn't just about oil. And it's not just about drugs. He was the boss of bosses, right? And he was corrupting that whole area. And it is a communist takeover of that whole area. That's what Trump knows. So, right, I'll keep going with it then. Go back to my main screen again. So 53, 4 years later, this one is an outstanding video, right? I want to get this on record just in case, because I know Rumble will keep it up. 4 years after Sullivan's affidavit, a highly decorated CIA agent provided similar testimony about the election fraud scheme just before the 2024 election. Now listen to this geezer and who he is.
Hello, my name is Gary Burnson. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force and a retired senior operations officer and chief of station of the Central Intelligence Agency. For over 3 decades, I served in the U.S. national security apparatus in various capacities. Shortly after the attacks of 11 September 2001, I entered Afghanistan and commanded CIA paramilitary forces, helping seize the cities of Taloqan and the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul. I was the driving force and architect of the Battle of Tora Bora. I held the position as chief of Hezbollah operation in CIA's counterterrorism center for several years, and concluded my service in CIA as a chief of station in Latin America combating narco-terrorists. Approximately 6 years ago, a business associate and I began working together as whistleblowers for the Department of Justice, FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. Our target was the largest and most well-funded transnational criminal organization on the planet, called the Cartel del Sol, Cartel de Sal. Cartel del Sol is the Venezuelan government and is led by Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Diosdado Cabello, Minister of Defense Vladimir Lopez Padrino, President of the National Assembly Jorge Rodriguez, and former Director General of Military Counterintelligence Hugo Carbajal, who was detained in Spain several years ago and extradited to New York. He is currently awaiting trial for narco trafficking. Venezuelan President Maduro has a U.S. indictment and bounty of U.S. $15 million for his capture. Diosdado Cabello has U.S. indictment and a $10 million bounty on his head. At least 6 other Venezuelan cabinet members and senior officials are indicted. In the last 20 years, the Cartel del Sol has stolen $1 trillion from Venezuela's national oil company, PDVSA, and embezzled $500 billion from its national treasury. It not only has, but continues to produce and smuggle 25 to 40 metric tons of cocaine every month out of its country into the world. The Cartel del Sol is a $2 trillion transnational criminal organization and the most well-resourced criminal syndicate in history. Through bribery and investments of its funds, it controls 12 countries and world leaders. It has massive investments in the US and European financial markets and institutions. As we conducted investigations against the...
Just listen to what he just said. They have massive investments in Europe and financial institutions, right? That's really important, all right? And you've just seen a load of American Air Force major lift carriers, or whatever you want to describe them, come into the UK.
Cartel del Sol. and presented them one after another to the U.S. Department of Justice, we noticed and pursued leads from the cartel's money laundering operations to the world of non-governmental organizations and election companies. After witnessing election irregularities associated with the 2020 U.S. presidential election, we decided to direct time and resources to Cartel del Sol links to U.S. and global election fraud. After an exhaustive 3.5-year investigation, it is indisputable. Smartmatic Election Systems was created at the direction of now deceased Venezuelan dictator Hugo Chavez, and its source code, the basis of its operating system, developed jointly by Venezuela's Consejo Nacional Electoral and Smartmatic, was designed to allow election results to be altered without the knowledge of voters and the public. Additionally, the Venezuelan CNE holds ownership of Smartmatic's source code. Each time the Venezuelan CNE and Smartmatic update the source code, a copy of it is stored at the vault at the Venezuelan Central Bank. In 2005, a European Union electoral observation mission to Venezuela published a report stating the Venezuelan regime owns Smartmatic source code. The Venezuelan government signed that report as factual. Smartmatic's first election in Venezuela was the 2003 recall election of Hugo Chavez. The CNE director at the time, Jorge Rodriguez, at the direction of the Cuban Directorate General of Intelligence, DGI, hired 3 Venezuelan American computer engineers that were graduates of Simon Bolivar University, a Venezuelan university linked to the U.S. university MIT. They had already registered a software company in Delaware and opened an office for it in Boca Raton. The engineers, Antonio Mujica, Roger Peñate, and Alfredo Anzola, established Smartmatic at the direction of the Venezuelan regime, built the source code, and flew off to Italy to buy lottery machines from Olivetti to serve as election hardware. They succeeded in altering enough votes to ensure Hugo Chavez's victory in the recall election. Secure in power, President Chavez decided to weaponize this capability beyond Venezuela's border. Smartmatic would enter into the U.S. election market in Cook County, Illinois, and the state of New Jersey for Democratic Party primary races in 2006. In 2005, Smartmatic orchestrated the purchase of Sequoia Voting Systems, Inc., a U.S. company. Sequoia was a company that had conducted elections in the U.S. for over 100 years and had a 22% market share of the U.S. electoral market. Approximately 18 months later, the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States, CFIUS, began investigating the ownership of Smartmatic because of Smartmatic's Venezuelan connection. Smartmatic immediately put its source code in the machines, in the Sequoia machines. Smartmatic tried to conceal its Venezuelan connection by hiring a former U.S. naval officer, Jack Blaine, to set up a holding company, SVS Holding, to place its ownership of Sequoia in stock. In December 2006, Smartmatic entered into an agreement with CFIUS to sell Sequoia in 6 months. Antonio Mujica, one of the 3 original founders, then found a little-known election company in Toronto, Canada, Dominion Election Systems, that had only managed one small local election in Toronto. He arranged for Dominion to purchase Sequoia. Dominion, owned by John Polis, with that purchase of Sequoia, would inherit the licensing agreement for Smartmatic's source code, the source code owned by the Venezuelan regime, i.e. the Cartel del Sol. To be clear, Smartmatic and Dominion would ultimately sign an agreement that provided Dominion with the U.S. market and Smartmatic the international global market. The only 2 exceptions are that Smartmatic does elections in Los Angeles County and Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico was an issue they ultimately settled in court. In Caracas, in a building owned by the CNE, the Consejo Nacional Electoral, more than 100 software engineers, half from the CNE and half from Smartmatic, worked side by side. Their effort for more than a decade was to perfect the techniques of altering elections and defeating audit. In 2018, Smartmatic publicly and with the approval of the Venezuelan regime broke with the regime, the Cartel del Sol, because the Venezuelan CNE's theft of an election was so egregious. The techniques of the source code and machine operate and conceal a theft of an election when the spread of the candidates is between the 3 to 5 percentage points. As sophisticated as the machine is, it can be defeated with significant turnout against it. The recent 2024 election in Venezuela was also so blatantly stolen, and the machine could not conceal that massive spread either. In its place, a company called Xclay took Smartmatic's place as the election provider in Venezuela. Allowing Smartmatic to exit Venezuela in this fictitious manner allowed the regime to retain its power and influence over the global electoral market. Smartmatic built a production facility for electronic voting equipment hardware just outside Beijing, China, and then shipped the hardware to a warehouse in Taiwan. In violation of US law, the hardware was marked as manufactured in Taiwan and shipped to both Smartmatic and Dominion for use in US elections. Dominion Voting Systems manages elections in almost all the swing states in the US, which determines who wins the presidency. We have evidence and witnesses that can prove the source code operating the election machines of both Smartmatic and Dominion and other election companies are owned by the Venezuelan narco regime. We have evidence and witnesses proving the machines are manufactured in the People's Republic of China. Every citizen needs to be asking, where's the DOJ, FBI, CISA, and where's the CIA? Is anyone in the national security apparatus defending our democracy or enforcing the law? And if that isn't enough to convince you there's a major problem, Dominion, in an additional step to conceal its manipulation of U.S. elections, moved its research and development and servers, which store swing state voting information, to its office in Belgrade, Serbia. In the Belgrade office, Venezuelan, Chinese, and Serbian software engineers maintain system administrator status over swing state elections and alter elections as directed by the Cartel del Sol, the Cuban DGI, and the Chinese CCP. The facility and its personnel are protected by Serbia's counterintelligence service. Swing state voter information is saved on Huawei servers in Dominion's Belgrade office. These servers are linked to Huawei servers in Hong Kong, China. For years, the U.S. national security apparatus has identified Huawei and its technology as a threat to U.S. national security. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, a component of the United States Department of Homeland Security, is responsible for cybersecurity and infrastructure across all levels of government. CISA has 3,100 employees and a $2.9 billion budget. In 2020, when faced with calls to address election irregularities, CISA did a conference call with Smartmatic and Dominion in order to better able to address the public's concerns and assure everyone that there had been no irregularities. Yes, it's shocking. CISA decided to consult the criminals in order to respond to the American public's outcry. In August 2024, 3 current and former executives of Smartmatic were indicted in Florida in connection with bribery during the 2016 election in the Philippines. Among those arrested executives is Roger Piñate, one of the 3 founders and current president of Smartmatic. Roger Piñate paid $8.5 million in bail. What the public will soon learn is that the bribery paid in the case was not to obtain a contract. The bribery was paid to alter election results. We have the CNE's source code, the source code employed by Smartmatic, Dominion, and others. We will surrender it to appropriate authorities. Source code, like DNA, can easily be matched with other systems to prove that they are from the same family. In this particular case, it is a family of altering elections. 2 years ago, we briefed a senior FBI agent in Washington, D.C. That agent, after seeing our 3-hour presentation with corporate ownership documents, engineering specifications, and witness statements, told us to flee Washington, D.C., that the FBI would actively work to destroy our efforts and seek ways to prosecute us in order to stop our investigative efforts. That was a stunning moment, hearing those words from a 20-year veteran of the FBI. 7 months ago, with our attorney, we briefed a U.S. attorney and 2 assistant U.S. attorneys, federal prosecutors from the Department of Justice. The U.S. attorney told us he would forward the information to the Office of Public Integrity at the Department of Justice. That U.S. attorney followed up with us months later to see if the Office of Public Integrity had contacted us. They never did. Smartmatic, Dominion, and their media allies will immediately point to the fact that Fox News settled with Dominion, paying U.S. $787.5 million, and that Newsmax just settled with Smartmatic this past week in a defamation case as evidence of Smartmatic and Dominion innocence. In Fox News against Dominion, we briefed Fox News trial attorneys. Our lawyers were present when we did that. Fox News corporate officers refused to be briefed directly for that case. They wanted plausible deniability. Fox News corporate knew we had significant evidence and, more importantly, witnesses. When all the facts are known, Fox News executives and board will have to explain why they went down on their knees for enemies of the U.S. We briefed Newsmax's corporate attorney as well. Though their settlement with Smartmatic is not public, any settlement with either company and their masters, the Cartel del Sol, the Cuban DGI, the CCP, makes it more difficult for those of us trying to defend the country and our democracy. I ask everyone to go to the website, stolenelectionsfacts.com. That's stolenelectionsfacts.com. Here you will find articles and original source documents supporting the claim that Smartmatic and Dominion are employing a source code created and owned by the Venezuelan regime with hardware manufactured in China that alters election results. I will follow with other videos and statements to inform and educate others. Best-selling author Ralph Pizzullo has written the book Stolen Elections: The Plot to Destroy Democracy. It will be released in late October. Mr. Pizzullo interviewed my whistleblower associate and I, and several of our key witnesses. This is a must-read to understand one of the greatest crimes ever committed against the United States. This is an assault on our democracy. Again, go to the website, stolenelectionsfacts.com. Look at the timeline, the documents, and the original sources that are attached. Thank you for your time. God bless America. We go forward.
God bless America. And God bless England. So getting back to this, so a narco-terrorist state was actually in charge of our elections since 2006. The goal to place communists into power and destroy America from within. But there was a small group of people who stopped this nightmare, probably less than 30. They saved the world. The first big mistake for Smartmatic, Julian Andres Bastizo, got a divorce. He was chief of elections in the Philippines, Malloch. In 2017, his wife disclosed documents which showed he was worth $1 billion. The Department of Justice launched an investigation. Bastizo was impeached. He fled to the USA. He refused to return to the Philippines amid a Senate probe. His wife entered the Department of Justice Witness Protection Program. Money laundering and conspiracy charges against Bautista were filed on September the 19th, 2023. Bautista allegedly received bribe money from top executives at Smartmatic for assistance in their bid to secure multi-million-dollar election contracts. But Smartmatic was not named in the US court records in 2023. Philippines officials wanted to know who helped Bautista. In 2024, US authorities dismissed reports that Bautista had been arrested after money laundering and conspiracy charges were filed in August. Bautista not in US custody, and we decline to comment further, said Nicole Navas-Oxman at Biden's Department of Justice. What was going on? According to my sources, Bautista, I think that is, disappeared because the CIA is hiding him. Why? Because US aid gave money to Malloch to hire Smartmatic for the 2016 election in Philippines. Bautista can't testify in US court that the US government provided the money. After all, the CIA doesn't want the American people to know that US aid is actually funding Smartmatic. That would be crazy, right? US aid pushing Smartmatic into the Bosnia right now. US government invests 500,000 US to pilot new voting technologies in 2024 Bosnia and Herzegovina municipal elections, right? And bearing in mind someone else who's involved with them elections in, and I've got to think of the name, Montenegro, is Nigel Farage's best mate, George, all right, who got done for a big fraud in America. The CIA wouldn't still use USAA to fund Smartmatic even after the Department of Justice itself had charged 15 of Venezuela's top communist officials with running a narco-terrorism conspiracy. Press release, and then you can hit that and it goes on to it. Juan Andres Bautista's divorce was not the only problem for Smartmatic. A group of former IC analysts had produced a document on 2020 election fraud that provided sufficient legal predicate to use NSA unprocessed raw data signals, this is what people don't know, to prove the fraud by December 2020. In December 2020, NCA Director for Strategic Planning, Rich Higgins, gave a briefing on the document and a complete data set to both the White House and President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani. On January the 4th, 2021, US senators and staffers were also briefed on the document. Among the US senators who were briefed was Senator Kevin Cramer and Ron Johnson. Several NSC officials also got the documents. Neither Cramer nor Johnson nor Trump's NSC officials tried to authorize the investigation outlined in the documents. Had anyone called the phone number in the memo, they would have reached a senior legal counsel in the heart of the Pentagon. That one phone call would have launched an investigation using the unlimited resources of the US government. We're talking about NSA's raw signal data, which captures, listen to this, and I've said this for years, I can even show you to places in England where it happens. Signals data which captures every kind of electronic comms on Earth. What people spent the last 4 years uncovering would have been uncovered in a few hours and then sent to Trump, but the call never came. The evidence of the 2020 election fraud is literally sitting in a Department of Defense SCIF right now. And the same Department of Defense legal counsel that was waiting for a single phone call from Trump to start an investigation in 2020 is still waiting for that phone call in 2025, right now, today. Let's assess the situation as it stood in 2021-22. Sidney Powell was being sued and silenced. Rudy Giuliani was being sued and silenced. Mike Lindell was being sued and silenced. Patrick Bryan was being sued and silenced. And Fox, Newsmax, ONN were all being sued and silenced. That's when more patriots showed up to the fight. In April 2021, County Court of Malloch County, Colorado, was told to install a software update that would override the rigged 2020 general election records, which is a violation of federal law. Her name, Tina Peters. This is a sad story. So Tina Peters arranged for a consultant to make a forensic image of the server before and after the software update. By August 2021, the passwords and data associated with the Mesa County's 2020 election were leaked to the public. Colorado uses Dominion voting machines. 7 experts who reviewed the forensic images found that Mesa County's system did not meet Colorado certification requirements. Why? The system failed to generate and preserve audit trail files. Right? This is because it's designed that way. In fact, its audit features were disabled. All right. So when fraudsters design an election system, which is what I was also saying at court, anyone who was there at Chester in the Crown Court, these people they're not designing the system to be found out. They've designed their system so no one can see what's going on. It allows unauthorized changes to vote totals since it contains 36 wireless networking devices built into the voting system by the vendor. 2 experts also found that new unauthorized shadow databases were secretly created on the machine after vote counting began. Thousands of ballots that had already been counted then secretly reprocessed inside the voting machine, undetected by election officials. The system was also preset to erase critical records within a few days, including activity logs and user logins, which covered the tracks of anyone committing unauthorized access, software installation, or manipulation. This report was made public by September 21st. Dominion's Colorado SOS destroyed all data on the hard drive. Mesa County's machines once month machines 1 month after the April 2021 election, even though federal state laws require election records to be preserved for at least 22 months, right? In this country, it's less than a year, or it's a year, right? You can't tell me these people in this country ain't at it, right? Nobody went to jail except, and this is the sad part, Tina Peters. In August 2024, she was convicted on 7 of 10 charges of engaging in security breach to advance a false conspiracy theory of election fraud. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Right, an honest person again, right? Sentenced to 9 years in prison. A bit like what they're doing with me with bankrupting me. These people are fucking ruthless. But she had merely preserved election records, which it was her sworn duty to do. There was another group which investigated the stolen 2020 election from the very beginning. These men were intel professionals. One member was even inside Trump's NSC. The group was known as the Foot Patrol. Within a few days of the 2020 election, the Foot Patrol was providing accurate information about the voting machines to various public figures. That's because they had recruited former engineers from Smartmatic to map the entire system. The Foot Patrol put together technical presentation to the briefing to explain how the 2020 election was stolen in great detail. They provided the briefing to important public figures in 2020-2021. They explained 14 different ways to steal the election with machines. Wow. The Foot Patrol gave the briefing to senators, including Senator Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley. They did nothing. They briefed the House Freedom Caucus. They did nothing too. According to my sources, the staff of the House Freedom Caucus were good, but the members were too scared to do anything. The Chief of Staff for one minute told them, "We don't want to touch this." In fact, only one senator stood up for the truth, but that comes later. The Foot Patrol gave the briefing to the FBI agent in Washington, D.C. Well, when it was over, the FBI agent told them to flee the city as soon as possible. Why? Because they would be killed by the FBI if anyone found out what they were doing. The Foot Patrol gave the briefing to lawyers working for Trump's son-in-law a few days after the election in building in Arlington, VA. The Foot Patrol was basically attacked with unfriendly questions after the briefing they did nothing to. DEA officials tried to stop the Foot Patrol from giving the briefing because the DEA considered some of the info belonged to them. Trump's own DEA officials didn't understand that the drug dealers that they were watching were also in control of America's voting machines. The Foot Patrol also collected all of the internet website information related to Smartmatic and Dominion in a database to preserve records before it was all wiped from the bad guys. That's when they found the ultimate source, the anonymous Japanese guy. It turns out one guy tracked all the internet traffic flowing between Dominion, Serbia, and Hong Kong on Election Day 2020. And that one Japanese guy posted that info on his little anonymous account. The Foot Patrol contacted him to get all the IP addresses that Dominion used. But what did the anonymous Japanese guy want for a full file of all the IP addresses that Dominion used inside USA on Election Day 2020? He wanted a donation of $20. To this day, nobody knows his name. Now here, the most important part, the IPs obtained from the anonymous Japanese guy on Twitter's X were crucial in stopping the steal of the 2024 election. Literally could not be done without that information. So that guy helped save America. He might not even know it too. This IP info led to an astonishing discovery that the traitors at CISA.gov deny to this day. The primary data center for the 2020 election was hosted in a foreign country on a Huawei server. That's a Chinese server. That's right. America's election system is in the hands of its enemies. CISA is supposed to be the place inside the government that protects Americans' vital infrastructure. But CISA is actually the nerve center where America's elections are stolen. In fact, CISA actually partners with the Smartmatic to practice beforehand. Right, and all that information's on there. 91, the Foot Patrol was in negotiation with Fox News to provide them with evidence and witnesses to fight the Dominion lawsuit. A meeting was called in April 2023. A former Trump cabinet secretary was advising the Mallochs. The official told Fox News to settle the case. Fox News immediately flipped its legal strategy. It settled with Dominion for $787 million. Then it fired top host Tucker Carlson 1 week later. Dominion's annual revenues were about $40 million. So the award was an absurd shakedown, not supported by case law. Here is the interesting part. The parent company of Fox News had apparently obtained $1.25 billion loan package 1 year later for no particular reason. How did Fox executives know they would need so much spare cash ahead of time? Very good. Very good investigative work. Who was a former Trump official who told Fox News to settle with Dominion? According to my sources, it was the same person who Tucker Carlson stopped from getting a position in the second Trump admin. Mike Pompeo? How Tucker Carlson killed Mike Pompeo's hopes of joining the Trump admin. All right, gotcha. Incredibly, Team Trump continued to invite this former Trump cabinet official to speak at public rallies as late as November the 4th, 2024. President Trump finally revoked security protection for this individual on January 23rd, 2025, 3 days after taking office. Why did it take so long for President Trump to understand the danger of the voting machines? Because there are influential figures in GOP circles who wanted Trump to misunderstand the danger. GOP donors, GOP lawyers, GOP politicians. 97, I think it's second to last. Some people are just finding out President Trump now gets it. America's voting machines are controlled by narco-terrorists who rule Venezuela. Right? That's an important statement at 97, right? Some people are just finding out that President Trump now gets it. America's voting machines are controlled by narco-terrorists who rule Venezuela. And they also technically rule America. Oil magnate Harry Sargent III is a donor and well known for his back channel efforts to temper hostilities between the US and Venezuela. On Friday, the Trump admin ordered his oil trading company to leave the South American country. Hang on a minute. Oil magnate Harry Sargent III, donor, well known for his back channel efforts to temper so calm down hostilities between US and Venezuela. On Friday, the Trump admin ordered his oil trading company to leave the South American country. Wow. Trump just revoked his permit to do business there at all. Right, so then people all saying this is all oil magnates and all that. He's just thrown one of them out of Venezuela. 2 weeks before doing this, President Trump designated Tren de Aragua as a foreign terrorist organization. Why? Because the group is conducting irregular warfare against the USA. 100. Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act in this order. Why? Because we are at war with Venezuela and Tren de Aragua is the army of the cartel that rules there. Maduro leads the regime-sponsored enterprise, Carlos de los Sols, and that is that style. So there's something else going on there. The cartel and the government are the same people. 101, the executive order says Venezuela is a hybrid criminal state that is perpetrating an invasion of and predatory incursion into the US. Per my sources, the Venezuelan cartel is the largest in the world with oil reserves and drugs. The smaller Mexican drug cartels take orders from it. It's like cutting the head off the snake. So, stop sharing, go back to that. Tell me, because you've been sitting here patiently listening to this, I thought it was really important to read out that to you. And if you go back to the beginning, you'll see these other things and what President Trump has said, what the other guys said on the videos, right? You should all understand this is one of the biggest things I've ever seen. A criminal enterprise literally took control of the United States of America. That's what I'm seeing. And that's why that team went in and arrested Maduro. Maduro is not just a socialist nation. It is a communist criminal country. And that is basically what's going on. So I want everyone to understand that. Is everyone happy with what they've just heard? Again, I'm not getting drawn into any of it. All I'm doing is trying to focus on the people that are giving the real information and then present it to you with no slants. Listen, I love the United States of America. I love the American people. I love their constitution. It come from England, not the British, right? The British are deeply involved with this. And I think that 100% that something is going on now where they're saying, we ain't having this, right? You're not getting away with it. The first arrest will show the way. Yeah. So that's it. Whereas our constitution says only Englishmen can be in position of power. Here as anyone but Englishmen in position of power. It's our homeland. Yeah, I know. And again, I think Rupert Lowe's getting there. He's the closest I've seen. But again, anyone who thinks that the British is a good thing is definitely not. They haven't stopped attacking America. And I have no doubt, as that Fred said, that listen, these people have got so much money. Imagine having, oil fields at your disposal and narcotics, literally 40 ton a month for Charlie, being distributed throughout the world. Do you know what I mean? And all that money has to be laundered in some way. And that's why they're talking about Bitcoin as well. That there's so much going on out there, it's unreal. So that's it. I have gone on for, what time did I start? 9:30, 10:30, so nearly 2 hours. But I felt that this was really important, that instead of being drawn into all this bullshit, my audience, right? And again, don't forget, I've been involved with this a long time, and I just think, when you see something and you say, listen, keep your head down, and then start looking for the feedback, and you'll find you ain't going to know the full truth in this. But I do believe there's something serious going on. I also believe that the United States of America is about to tell China and Russia and others to fuck off out the Western Hemisphere. I don't think they're playing games with it. I think they're going to take. They need Greenland, not for any resources. They need it for national security, and they will just put up a dome around that area and say, "Now fuck off and leave us." I'm hoping that they will include us in this, but they won't do it if the British, who are the ruling classes, are communist in nature and want to be with Europe, and that looks like what's going on at the moment, but it's not what the people want. So anyway, that's it. So I'm going to say, don't forget what I believe in. The Constitution is the solution. I am going to say good night, God bless to everyone. Lots of C-17 gunships from the UK yesterday. No, I know there's some serious shit happening. I don't even want to. I'll try and work out what the fuck they're doing. But listen, this is well planned. What happened in Venezuela. That's took months and months and months and months and months and months and months of planning. If you think he really took control in January 25, as soon as he swore the oath in, them people was training, right? And I can't see, And again, I want to emphasise as well, it has already been stated that he wasn't protected by Venezuelan guards. He was protected by Cuban guards. So there is something going on, and there's going to be something going on with all of them islands. They will probably take all of the British islands and say, "Listen, we ain't having this. You can't be attacking us like this in the back." So there you go. And I think obviously Canada's in the frame as well. That's it. Good night, God bless, and I will see you again tomorrow evening. And don't forget, we've got to start. We've got to get this information going about our event in Maplethorpe, and again, we're going to have our wonderful friend Dr. Glidden coming over with his lovely wife Brenda, and I'm sure he's going to enjoy being with all us. And we just say, look, we're just normal people. That's it. Au revoir, tiddly poo. Hopefully, I don't know what's going to go on with YouTube, but I'm not bothered about your YouTube shit. Right? People who are on YouTube are just, I don't know what. I'm not going to say anything. Right, that's it. I'm off. Tiddly poo. Good night. God bless. I wonder if that comes up on my screen. Yeah.